Best Idea Podcast with Stephen Cochran. And with the Olympics on, every time it comes on, since I've been an adult, when I watch it, because I watch the swimming and boxing and some other stuff, wrestling they just put on there, but always gets me thinking, do we take our sports entirely too seriously? And I definitely don't have any perspective on the rest of the world, but just as Americans, do we take our sports entirely too seriously? Maybe we do. You know, it starts young for most of us, I think. Even if you don't play a sport, you might admire one. And I'm lumping everything together, just that big word sports, like religion. You know, it can mean a lot of things, anything from chess to wrestling. But whatever it is, everybody picks their sport when they're young. And like anything that we start when we're young and we keep it all the way to adulthood, that thing is valuable. We've had that forever. So I think sports kind of falls into that category. But also as an adult, you sometimes have to step back and look at things more objectively and just wonder if it's all worth it. You know, so just, sticking with the Olympics, you just think about how that goes down every 4 years. In the context of everything else going on in the world, the Olympics picks a city, goes there, and this tremendous infrastructure has to be built. Some places, like Berlin and some other places they've been, don't need as much work as others, like Greece in 2004 and everything that they had to build. But either way, it's a tremendous amount of money. The average Olympic cost for the city that does it is $5 billion for the Summer Olympics. The Winter Olympics is way cheaper. It's like $300 million. But $5 billion for the Summer Olympics. Average. I think this one that's going on now has broken the record in Tokyo of 12 or 13 billion dollars spent. And not even just that. The money is one thing, but also the resources. The concrete that you can't just move somewhere else to use in something else. So there's tremendous infrastructure, huge stadiums that can hold thousands of people, huge pools for the swimming and bobsled tracks and just all this shit that it's hard to imagine using again. Well, that's because a lot of it doesn't get used again. They have just a trail of dead stadiums and, Olympian villages or whatever they call those little cities they build for the athletes to live in. So the worst is probably Athens, Greece. They hosted in 2004 and spent billions of dollars that they didn't have trying to put on the best possible show. Most of the venues they built for that Summer Olympics are abandoned now. You can see pictures of them online. I'll put the websites in the show notes of a lot of the things I'm talking about. But you just imagine buildings falling apart, dilapidated, covered in graffiti. Bosnia, they had the 1984 Winter Olympic Games, and they still have places that are just still sitting there. Old bobsled tracks, just stuff you're not going to use again. In Rio de Janeiro, when they did the 2016 games, they built this massive stadium within a mile or so of one of their largest slums, favela. So it's all over the place, this sort of stuff. And that makes sense. Who needs that many stadiums and venues for sports or for the Olympic sports? Honestly, what we should do is just pick one place to have them if we're going to do this every 4 years. Just pick one spot, one city, and maintain it that way. Sounds like a much better idea. And we love the Olympics so much that we'll do it in the middle of a pandemic. That makes a whole hell of a lot of sense. It was Japan that decided to do it, but I recall turning on the TV and seeing athletes from all these other countries going there. So if that's not agreement, then I don't know what is. We're going to have fans. We're not going to have fans. I think they have something like 100 cases of COVID that have popped up there. Either they should have just done it and put in as many, mitigation measures as possible. But At this point, everybody there could have gotten vaccinated if they wanted to get vaccinated. If not, they don't want to. I'm pretty sure everybody there is an adult. Either do it and just roll on, or don't do it. But the half measures, they might end up closing the damn thing before it even finishes because they have so many COVID cases. It was a bad idea from the start, but we love sports. We, Americans, love sports. You know how much real estate is dedicated to sports over here? I mean, we have 30 stadiums just to handle the football crowds. A lot of real estate dedicated to playing sports. And those are just the pro stadiums. I'm not talking about the stadiums for every college that has teams in various sports and the high school stadiums. A lot of real estate in the country dedicated to sports. Maybe we take it a little too seriously. It's not even just the acreage. The money invested in building places like this is unbelievable. And it's not private money. It's not just a bunch of guys that can afford it getting together and paying for these massive stadiums. There is tax money all over these places. I had no idea how much of a break some of these companies got. Listen to this. So, SunTrust Park, the Atlanta Braves Stadium, $300 million. The Barclays Center, $300 million. Glendale, Arizona, the Cardinals Stadium, $312. That number, $300 million for Glendale, that's like half of what the city owes in debt. The Saints Stadium in New Orleans, they got $300 million. And, I mean, it only goes up. Orlando, the Amway Center, $430 million. The stadium for the Kansas City Chiefs and the Kansas City Royals is $475 million. You just think about if you live in one of these cities, in the day-to-day, what they lack, and then where this money went. And I'm not saying that sports aren't enjoyable. I'm just proposing that maybe we take them a little bit too seriously. Like the Colts Stadium, the Lucas Oil Stadium for the Indianapolis Colts, it's 86% tax money. $620 million went into that stadium being built. The most expensive one was in Arlington, the Cowboys Stadium, which is massive. And they got $944 million to build that stadium. Now, most of this was voters directly voting to give this money. So decisions are decisions. I'm just saying, when you stand back and look at the number, that's a hell of a lot of money. Maybe we take sports a little bit too seriously. We don't fuck around about our sports. I mean, there's a reason we love them. There's positive impacts on kids. It's one big thing people like for their kids to do sports because it teaches them teamwork and competitiveness and, work ethic and focus. And then there's just the physical fitness of it. If you get started young and continue doing something into your adulthood, but you can never, play at a higher level, a lot of times you'll enjoy watching that sport and critiquing it around people that might not know it as well as you, or enjoy watching around people that know just as much or more than you, and going back and forth. I mean, it's a lot of fun. It's a meeting ground for family and friends. A lot of times, even if you don't watch a sport, people are having football on Sunday, you'll go to the barbecue, or the fight on Saturday. And they do provide opportunities for some people to go on and have amazing success at high levels of different sports. There's a lot to love. I mean, it's not that the benefits aren't there. I guess it's a levels question. What level, what degree should sports take from us? How much should we be paying attention? Are we taking it a little bit too seriously? If you don't think that you take sports too seriously, that it's just casually a part of your life, maybe that's true. But, I mean, every fan of any sport probably has an opinion about trans people playing in sports. Huh? I mean, doesn't have anything to do with the money, but you didn't see that part coming. But there's an aspect of sports we never really had to consider before. I mean, it's not entirely new. The first really famous transgender athlete was in tennis in the 70s. Her name was Renee Richards, but she was born as a man, as Richard Raskins. And she went to this K through 12 school called Horace Mann. First of all, it costs $53,000 a year now, this Horace Mann school. So, you know what kind of place it probably is. She played wide receiver. She pitched for the baseball team. She did swimming. She did tennis. Just so good at baseball. Actually, I read that she got an invitation to play with the Yankees. So, no slouch, a good athlete. But had surgery to remove her penis in 1975 and stuck with tennis and tried to play in the U.S. Open in 1976, but she got denied. Back then, they used to do something called a bar body test, which basically tested the chromosomes of your sex. And at first she refused to take the test because she knew she would fail. But then she actually took the test, and it came out inconclusive, oddly enough. And she didn't take it again. So she wouldn't take it again, and they said that she couldn't play. Well, she sued, and she actually won. Oddly enough, she had actually played in the U.S. Open 5 times before that as a man. But anyway, so she won the case in New York when the Supreme Court ruled in her favor. This guy, Judge Alfred Asconi, is quoted as saying, "This person is now a female." And she went on to play for 5 years. She made it to the finals of the U.S. Open once, but lost. And she retired in like 1981, something like that. That was the first transgender person that played on the sex of the team that they identified with. And didn't have tremendous success. I know there's a lot of concern about advantages of people's physiological differences. In this particular case, you know, it's not as though Richard Raskins became Renee Richards and started just destroying the competition. She had a very respectable career, and that was that. And then in 2015, there was Chris Moser, who was the first trans person to qualify for Team USA in duathlons or dualathons. I'm not really sure how they say it, but it's like most of a triathlon. It's the running and the bicycling, so it's pretty intense. And so Chris was born a woman, transitioned to a man, and actually did really, really well. Series of awards, achievements, and also, obviously, was one of the first trans people to get on the team. Everybody's got an opinion about this because we take our sports very seriously. Maybe we take our sports a little too seriously. This year, they have another trans person, first transgender athlete in the Olympics. Again, born a man, lifting weights in women's competition. Laurel Hubbard from New Zealand. She weightlifted while she was a man, but not at a high level, didn't really try, wasn't in those competitions, but since transitioning has won several titles in the women's division. And if you're thinking that the reason that Laurel Hubbard is better at weightlifting in the women's division than the men's division because she had the benefit of going through puberty as a male and having all that testosterone, you would be right. But my question is, and it's kind of, I guess, the overall question of today is, why do we really care? I mean, if you think about it, what are the consequences of men and women, whether trans or not, men and women, people, competing against each other in most sports? And we'll get to combat sports, because to me that's a separate issue. But let's take combat sports out of it for a second. All other sports. Why exactly do we care? Why do we care enough that we even have a separation? So take track, for example. What is it about the consequences of losing a foot race that makes us think that we have to have two separate races, one for the boys and one for the girls? What's the point? Why do we care that much? You know, I've heard that it's about fairness, that it's only fair for men to compete against men and women to compete against women. I don't really understand how you invoke fairness there, because you're talking about how people were born, which is the epitome of luck and unfairness. There's nothing fair about it, so it doesn't really matter. The easier thing to do is just to keep everybody at one level of just being a person. If you are a person of, say, a certain weight or height or however you want to make divisions in different sports, depending on the sport, you're just a person and you do that thing. Why do we care so much that it's got to be separated? So just imagine if track, everybody just raced against everybody. And instead of having the top 10 men doing the 40-yard dash, you'd have top 20 people, men and women, and whoever won the foot race won the foot race. And whoever comes in 10th comes in 10th and is known as the 10th best runner in the world and the 13th best runner in the world. I don't understand anymore why we care so much. People will race, one person will win, and be the fastest person. What is wrong with that? Because what would it do? It would just change the way that we see the rankings in different sports. Because everything's relative after enough time went by, that's how we would see it, is just people competing against each other. And rather than saying, well, the number one man in track will often beat whoever may be the number one woman in track. Well, first of all, let's see how the foot race turns out. But second of all, then let's say that the number one woman in track, in a certain event in track, pick whichever one you want, let's just say that she's actually the 6th fastest person when it comes time to compete under the lights. Well, then she's the 6th fastest person. And there's plenty to be admired considering how many thousands or tens of thousands of people try the sport. She's still elite. Whoever's in the top 25, you're still in the top 25 of the world. You're still at an elite level. Why do we have to have it separated? What's even the benefit of having it separated? You know, we would start talking about the top 10 fastest people, not just the fastest woman or the fastest man. And I keep saying fast and I keep using track. Take any sport you want. Tennis, anything. I mean, almost anything. Basketball, archery, artistic gymnastics, artistic swimming, athletics, badminton, baseball, softball, basketball, beach volleyball, BMX freestyle, BMX racing, kayak flatwater, kayak slalom, diving, equestrian, fencing, soccer, golf, handball, marathon swimming, modern pentathlon, mountain biking, rhythmic gymnastics, road cycling, rowing, sailing, shooting, skateboarding, sport climbing, surfing, swimming, table tennis, track cycling, trampoline, triathlons, volleyball, water polo, weightlifting. Why do we give a shit? Why do we care? At the end of it, you would have done the same amount of training, and you'll end up in the place that you end up. Everything else would fall into place. I've heard a lot of arguments to keep things the way they are. I don't really understand too many of them because they're easy to change. Scholarships, for example. I've heard that it would be unfair to let men and women race together in track because there are a lot of scholarships to women's colleges that women wouldn't get because they wouldn't be ranked as high. Well, the people that are assessing at those women's colleges are going to use their own judgment and give the scholarships to the people they want. None of that is going to change. You'll have different people in the top 10, top 20, top 30, but nothing's going to fundamentally change about who gets a scholarship at a women's college. Whoever gets it is the person that that school chose to give it to. I mean, you're acting like these people are just closing their eyes and whoever has the fastest time in a foot race or the longest jump or who throws the furthest javelin. I mean, it's just not the way things work. Why do we care so much? Like steroids is another one. Another aspect of sports that make me wonder why we care so much. Performance enhancers. Why do we still keep those out of most sports? It doesn't make sense. Performance enhancer. Can't do anything but help the game along. And first of all, it's gotten a lot better than it used to be. Much, much healthier. Back in the day, it was all cocaine, chloroform, and amphetamines. They didn't have growth hormones till the 50s. Before that, it was just anything that got you up. But why are steroids such a big deal in sports? Why do we care so much about our sports? They even made the State of the Union. Bush talked about steroids in sports in 2004, something like that, in his State of the Union address. Steroids. I mean, it would just increase the level of play. What are the consequences there? One may say you have an unfair advantage. You could easily say the opposite. You just say that you're level in the playing field. Everybody has advantages that they're born with or they get through work ethic. How do you parse that out? Come on. It's just too murky. So an athlete that plays baseball cannot use a human growth hormone, but they can use creatine. Doesn't make any sense. They can use caffeine, but they can't smoke weed, which, not the right kind of performance enhancing. But weed can help you with anxiety. So maybe performance anxiety is helped by marijuana. That's one of the things I think it could be performance enhancing about weed as a little side note. But drug testing, it's expensive. The Olympics spends $300 million a year on drug testing. There's somewhere between like $200 and $400 to test somebody. $300 million. That's just the Olympics. It's hard to find numbers on the NFL or NBA. I don't know how much drug testing they do, but call it $100 per person. Easily add up to a lot of money just to make sure people aren't doing what they're probably doing anyway. And really all that testing does is make sure that the wealthiest people in any sport have access to ways to get around the tests. I mean, people are going to find a way around it, around anything. But it's curious why we care that much. That if you play baseball, you might take steroids, or, soccer, or skiing. Now, in my mind, there is a difference between non-combat and combat sports. And I don't have as strong a position on this, but it seems to me that because the consequences are different in combat sports, then the parameters should be different. To have a separation between biological males and females when it comes to combat sports seems to make a lot of sense. And for obvious reasons. The outcome of a volleyball game is only that somebody's losing a volleyball game. The outcome of a boxing match or a wrestling match could be permanent damage for life. Now, granted, these are adults that are making adult decisions, but I think that it's a stretch for any society to allow biological males and biological females to engage in combat publicly. I can sense a hint of hypocrisy there, but not enough that it's going to bother me. So I'm just going to keep on going. So in combat sports, I think it makes sense to have that bifurcation. Makes sense. But it doesn't necessarily make sense to spend hundreds of millions or billions of dollars on the sports. I mean, the stadiums and stuff that I was talking about earlier, it's like $7.5 billion just in those stadiums. And test for what? These people signed up to do whatever it is they're doing. Make them disclose what they're taking and let the chips fall where they may. And obviously this is not like about sports that anybody participates in individually, like me, or I assume whoever's listening that you're not a professional athlete. If you are, congratulations. But the stuff that you do to stay active and be vital, I'm not talking about that at all. I'm talking about the attention, the money, the energy spent on sports as a country. That's what I'm talking about. How much we're willing to give financially, how much negative energy we're willing to put out to other people over fucking sports. The idealistic version of sports is that it's supposed to bring people together, but top to bottom, it hasn't done a really great job. It costs a lot of money, wastes a lot of money, and causes a lot of stupid arguments. So, if you ask me, we lighten up on who plays sports with whom. We legalize steroids and anything that's not combat. Keep the Olympics in one place, and if a pandemic occurs the year of, just skip it till the next one rolls around in 4 years. I appreciate you listening. If you think I missed anything or if I'm just off base on everything, please let me know. thebestideapodcast@gmail.com. And I'll see you next time.